They think that what is more likely, and some of them, for instance, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky has said this publicly, they think that Donald Trump is covering for some people who may have been, associated with Epstein and are afraid of the blowback.
Philip Wegman, Real Clear Politics White House reporter. Thank you so much for joining the Trump Report today.
Thank you for having me, Maddie.
It has been a big week. Of course, we've seen this government shutdown finally ending after 43 days, but this seems to have been overshadowed by the fact that House Democrats released these 3 emails from Epstein's estate, which shows conversations between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, and Jeffrey Epstein and author/journalist Michael Wolff. So Donald Trump was mentioned in these emails where he indicated that he knew, that it was told he knew about the girls, and he spent hours with the victim at Epstein's house, which was reportedly Virginia Giuffre. So along with the fact that the House Oversight Committee ended up releasing 20,000 documents relating to Epstein's estate, but there is so much still being sifted through when it comes to that. But I mean, Phil, it is obviously no coincidence when it comes to the timing of this. Are you under the impression that the Democrats decided to publish these emails the day the Republicans were set to end the shutdown?
Totally a coincidence. Like, they just had no ulterior motive. So just to lay things out here, because there's a lot of moving parts, you have House Democrats releasing these 3 tranches of emails that you just referenced. Those are emails from Jeffrey Epstein to Michael Wolff and others, where he alleges that Donald Trump knew about his behavior towards underage girls long before it was public, sort of basically raising this question of what did the president know and when did he know it? Because, of course, Trump has said that he split ties with Jeffrey Epstein in the early 2000s over his conduct. But then you have House Republicans who released a tranche of about 20,000 emails that all of us are still sorting through. And the reason why this is so significant in the long term is because there's been fight to actually have the files and the emails released. We just saw, House Republicans really fight tooth and nail to stop this discharge petition in the House to keep that from happening. They failed. There's going to be a vote on that next week. We'll see what comes of that in the future. But in the Oval last night, you see this moment where you have Donald Trump, appreciating this triumph that he has succeeded over Democrats, and he's about to reopen the government. But even then, in the Oval Office, as he's surrounded by Speaker Mike Johnson, well-wishers, who had just had dinner with him, and then other folks from industry, he knows 2 things. He knows, first, that Democrats can shut the government down again in January, and he also knows that this Epstein cloud is growing. It's not going to go away. It's going to stick around. And so yesterday was very eventful, and I'm sure that we will be unpacking it even better and with more detail than I just did.
The White House has said these emails proved absolutely nothing other than the fact that President Trump did nothing wrong. Caroline Leavitt said that it was a fake narrative to smear President Trump. So, I mean, you mentioned that you were in the Oval Office yesterday, Phil, but is the White House in full-blown panic mode as this obviously dominates the news cycle?
Not publicly. The press secretary, she shrugged these off during the briefing, and they note that Virginia Giuffre, one of the most prominent victims of Epstein, who took her own life very tragically, that she had said that Trump never acted untowards towards her. And so the White House is saying, why is it that Democrats went out of their way to redact the name of one of these victims to make it appear more salacious than it actually is? Because Epstein said that it was, conversations with Virginia about Trump. Well, what we've learned, again, from other documents previously is that Virginia Giuffre said that Trump never acted untowards towards her. But I think that it's not full blown crisis mode. I think that they've weathered these storms before. They think that they can, weather this one. But again, I think with the Epstein files, it just cuts to the central premise of the Trump presidency. He promised that he was going to come in and upend the system. In fact, he promised on this that he was going to bring transparency and justice. And then when he got to Washington, D.C., he did a complete and total 180. And so now you have some in his own party, like Representative Thomas Massey, asking, is the president covering for someone?
So you mentioned, Phil, that we saw oversight Democrats release these three emails that took the world by storm yesterday, and now we've got the whole House Oversight Committee releasing these 20,000 documents, which, yes, we're still sifting through to see what means something, what doesn't mean something. Trump is mentioned multiple times in these emails as Epstein and Michael Wolff kind of follow along with his election and his presidency in what seems like a very sinister way. There's conversations around not so well, kind of blackmailing him, kind of looking to see what they can get out of if he wins the presidency, and then when he wins the presidency. And then in 2017, he calls Trump an evil beyond belief and dumb. And then in 2015, he basically offers a journalist via emails photos of Trump and girls in bikinis in my kitchen.
Yeah, as if I think that. I mean, I guess two things here. First, I would not trust Jeffrey Epstein's character witness of absolutely anyone. But beyond that, one of the things that stood out to me, and this is perhaps my bias towards our industry, is immediately I thought to myself, what the hell is Michael Wolff doing? And the word journalist should never be next to his name ever again. There's a way that you work a source to try and get them to tell you information. Sometimes you show a little bit of ankle. Sometimes you make sort of, more out there suggestions to try and lead them along, get them to open up, speak more forthrightly. And certainly when you would be dealing with a monster like Epstein, his crimes were well known at this point when Michael Wolff was in contact with him. You would be on guard. What you wouldn't do as a journalist is you wouldn't offer, political relations advice, as it seemed that Wolff was doing. I mean, he was gaming out the scenario where Epstein could use some of this information, like you said, for maximum impact. And if your listeners had not, set aside any of Michael Wolff's publications, I think now would be a very good time to do that.
Well, these emails, the three emails that released yesterday, and then the 20,000 that were kind of released on Wednesday night, you do see Michael Wolff kind of acting more of his, I guess, PR and image consultant, rather than, I don't know, just a friend helping out. And then we saw Michael Wolff, he released this Instagram video yesterday where he said, I've been trying to talk about this story for a very long time, and perhaps we're getting close to the smoking gun. He also said that these two men, referring to Epstein and Trump, had the closest of relationships for more than a decade. So I don't know, Phil, what your interpretation is, but the way that Michael Wolff has come across in all of these emails almost makes him less credible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Michael Wolff during the first Trump administration made clear that he was willing to go with narrative rather than reported fact. I think he's often said as much. He's someone who wants to get a good story, not get the story right. I did not follow his Instagram video because I don't find him credible, and I don't think other people should as well, especially when you look at these emails where he's talking to Jeffrey Epstein about when to release information that he has on Donald Trump. This goes beyond trying to get information out of a source, and this goes back to what we were saying a moment ago, where you're offering PR advice, where you're offering political advice here to try and get a stronger hand. I find this really sort of disgusting, not just on the moral level, but for professional standards in our industry.
Are you looking at the emails thinking that the ones between Epstein and Ghislaine, where he says that Trump knows about the girls, he spent hours with a victim, obviously, which is reported to be Virginia Giuffre, are you looking at those emails thinking they're more damaging to Donald Trump than, say, anything that Michael Wolff is involved in? Because if you sift through these 20,000 emails, he is in a lot of them with Epstein talking about Trump, and they almost look like two kind of small, weak men trying to take down someone who is running for the presidency and then again elected.
Yeah, anytime you have primary source material, I mean, that gets an extra level of credibility rather than hearsay, from someone after the fact. I mean, we can see what Epstein was writing in this moment, and then we can cross reference that with other things that are known on the record. I think that the White House has a good answer when it comes to Virginia Giuffre because, she said that Donald Trump was not one of these monsters. I'll be sifting through this material much more closely to see if there's another victim involved here. But I think that the prevailing idea, at least among the Republicans that I'm talking to, is they don't think that Donald Trump, did anything malicious. They're of the opinion that if he had, then there would have been a leak during the previous administration. That the DOJ during the Biden era would have leaked politically damning information on Donald Trump. They think that what is more likely, and some of them, for instance, Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky has said this publicly. They think that Donald Trump is covering for some people who may have been associated with Epstein and are afraid of the blowback. And look, if you even look at some of the names that have been released, I mean, Larry Summers, formerly the president of Harvard. You have former Obama administration officials, and there's no suggestion that they were involved in any of these malicious sex crimes, but they knew that Epstein was. They didn't care about his felonies, and they still remained in contact with him because he was a plugged in and influential guy. And that is also incredibly shameful.
But Phil, even if this doesn't incriminate Donald Trump or make him look really guilty of anything, as the White House is saying, or whether he hasn't done anything wrong, this does put him in the light of having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, potentially having been in his house, spending hours with Virginia Giuffre. Obviously, Donald Trump said that one of the reasons why they had this fallout decades ago is because he felt that Jeffrey Epstein was stealing workers off him at Mar-a-Lago, which included Virginia Giuffre. I think that because Donald Trump has denied any kind of anything to do with Epstein's agenda, anything to do with his trafficking ring or any parties he's had, these emails just kind of put him in a light where that people could say, well, I feel like you've lied about your relationship. So what else is there that you've lied about?
Yeah, I think it goes back to Donald Trump promising that he's going to upend the apple cart and promising specifically on Epstein that he was going to make this information available. I mean, it wasn't just once or twice. Up and down the cabinet room table, you have everyone from Vice President J.D. Vance to FBI Director Kash Patel, Attorney General Pam Bondi, saying, we're going to release this information. And then they pull that 180 and they say that they're not going to. Obviously, there are a lot of different considerations with some of the grand juries. This is not something that you just forward in your inbox one day. But I think that the political implication here is that it is a distraction. Donald Trump still has a lot that he wants to get done before members of Congress leave to campaign for the midterms. It's going to be incredibly difficult for him to do that so long as we're talking about Epstein. And frankly, just one of the lessons that we've learned in the first year of the second season of Trump is that Republicans will not split with him on just about any other issue except for this one. And that's telling because Donald Trump is thinking about life from today until 2028. He is not thinking about the future beyond that. These members of Congress, they know some of the Republicans that if they don't support the discharge petition or if they don't vote to release this information, that there's going to be campaign ads against them. And so I think that this is a fracture within the GOP, and I think that's why Speaker Johnson has said, "Hey, we're just going to hurry up. We're going to have this vote." Ultimately, of course, though, that would have to go over to the Senate, where it faces an uphill battle, and then it would have to go to Donald Trump's desk, where it would almost certainly, perish.
Well, on that note, just for the context for our audience of what else has happened in the last few days, of course, we've seen Congress return after 40 days or so on recess. Adelita Grijalva, the Arizona congresswoman, she was officially sworn in yesterday by Mike Johnson after waiting, 50 days or so to be after being elected. Critics really believed that Mike Johnson was doing this to avoid this 218th final signature needed to force this discharge petition to a vote. So yesterday she officially signed this petition after being sworn in. Thomas Massey said that it succeeded in spite of a last-ditch effort by the president to fail the motion and Speaker Johnson's propaganda. While Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted, she said, "Next week we'll be voting to release the Epstein files. I honestly believe it's not only the right thing to do for the victims, but also the right thing to do for the country. Americans deserve transparency. Remember, Democrats had 4 years under Biden to release it all, but never even tried or cared. Now, under full Republican control, there are only 4 Republicans that signed the discharge petition for Massey's resolution." She goes on and on. She says basically this will happen next week, but I expect a number of Republicans to be a lot higher that actually will vote yes. So what's your reaction to that, Phil? As you mentioned, this doesn't mean that these Epstein files from the DOJ will be released next week, but it means that they're one step closer.
Yeah, it means that they're one step closer. I found the White House blitz on this incredibly remarkable. You had the administration reaching out to Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who essentially told the president, pound sand on this. It was a bridge too far. She couldn't side with him. She had promised that she was going to try and get these files released. She's going to continue to do so. Representative Nancy Mace, my sources say that she was playing phone tag with the president all day yesterday, that they couldn't get in touch, and eventually Mace just had to send him an email basically explaining why she was not going to fold. And then, Lauren Boebert, she's probably the most interesting of the Republicans who supported this beyond, Thomas Massey himself. But Boebert, the White House brought her over to campus, and they actually briefed her, not in just one of these conference rooms, as the White House is wont to do with members of Congress. No, they took her into the Situation Room. That's very interesting. Why would they bring her into the Situation Room to convince her to take her name off of this discharge petition? Is it perhaps because there was classified information communicated in that briefing with regards to Jeffrey Epstein? I think that is a worthwhile question, and one that ought to be explored.
If this happens, right, and the Senate passes it as well, Phil, should the Trump administration be worried? Do you see this, even just going off what your sources have told you about the lengths that they're going to get these Republicans to not vote alongside this petition? Does it show that they're worried about what is inside those files?
Yeah, right now there's 47 Senate Democrats, so they would need 13 Republicans to switch sides to get the 60 they need, and then it would go to the White House. Again, I think that it would be, a massive reversal. He's already done a backflip. He'd have to do another one on this issue and agree to release this information. So I don't think Trump's going to fold. I think what is more likely is that we're going to see a drip, drip, drip of leaks with regards to some of these emails. And then I think it becomes a liability, not for Donald Trump, but for Marco Rubio, for J.D. Vance, for some of these guys who want a political future in the post-Trump era, because they are going to be asked on a debate stage by a Democrat, why is it that after saying that this information needed to be released, that the victims needed justice, that the powerful who associated with Epstein, not just by trading a few emails here and there, but who actually engaged in some of this abuse, why weren't they held to account? And that's going to be a difficult question for a Vance, for a Rubio, or for any other Republican who seeks to move into the Oval Office after Donald Trump.
Well, we've seen you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. We've seen obviously Donald Trump publicly, I guess, criticize her this week. He said that she's lost her way. She's obviously very eager for these files to be released, but she's also criticized the fact that he said that, groceries were cheaper under his administration, the Biden administration. She disagreed and said not really. She also disagreed with his America First policy. She's apprehensive about giving so much foreign aid, and said basically believes that the Republican Party need to actually follow through with their America First agenda and that they campaigned on. So when she says that she thinks more Republicans will vote on releasing these Epstein files, it's hard it's hard to imagine that, Phil, just knowing the repercussions that happen when you go against Donald Trump, when you go against the leader. So do you see more Republicans, I guess, taking that risk and knowing what Marjorie Taylor Greene is going through right now with that? And Thomas Massey, of
Yeah,
course.
if it's a dozen or so Republicans who get on board, then those guys are going to face, you know, hell and much more in their coming primaries. I mean, Republicans are going to pull out all the stops to make life difficult for them. But if momentum grows and you have not just a dozen or so, but actually a significant number of House members, then I think there's strength in that crowd. But you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think that she's particularly interesting here because she's pointing back to the promise that Trump made about Epstein. She's also pointing back to the promise that he made during the campaign, which is that he was going to make life more manageable, more affordable for everyday Americans. And she is the inconvenient canary in the Republican coal mine saying, life is a bit better after Biden, but it's not that much better under Donald Trump. This is, really interesting because one of the things that is unique about Donald Trump is he can declare victory at any moment. We've seen him do this again and again. He decides, what a victory actually looks like. I mean, he just left China and said it was the greatest deal ever. We're still, waiting for that to take effect. The same thing with the tariffs. And he defines MAGA. He often tells reporters, I came up with it. I came up with Make America Great Again. I came up with America First. You can make an argument that a lot of things are America first, and you can sort of tailor that to your own priorities. I think what some of these Republicans are realizing is that during life after Trump, they're going to be the ones who are going to have to define those priorities, and they're making an effort now to do that. Donald Trump doesn't appreciate that dissent.
You mentioned Thomas Massey and him kind of weighing up the reasons why Donald Trump would have done this flip from originally wanting these files to be released to now where he's kind of putting the roadblocks in place. Thomas Massey basically was in an interview and he said that there's one reason he either, as you mentioned, wants to protect these high profile people that are either donors or they're friends that attend parties, they go to benefits, they raise money for the Republican Party. Or he wants to protect intelligence on sex trafficking in the US. So, I mean, what's the more likely case scenario, do you think, Phil, or what kind of is the biggest reason as to why they would go to such great lengths to avoid these being released to the public?
It definitely seems to be the latter. I mean, if you look at the track record of how the federal government has dealt with Jeffrey Epstein, just look at the sweetheart deal, the plea deal that he was given by Alex Acosta. Previously, you had administrations who really were dealing with Jeffrey Epstein with kid gloves. And so I couldn't imagine that there was some ongoing effort, that there's going to be some final reveal. I think that if that was the case, then the Trump administration would have said, hey, there's more work to be done. But they haven't. I think it's much more likely to be the latter.
The government shutdown, Donald Trump officially signed a bill on Wednesday officially ending this government shutdown, the longest shutdown in history. He said that we will never give in to the extortion of course, blaming Democrats, claiming that they caused millions of Americans to suffer. But Phil, just kind of on the ground in the US, obviously you're in DC, but who do you think Americans are blaming more for this right now in the aftermath of it?
Right now, polling suggests that it's Republicans, which is odd because Democrats were the ones who withheld their votes on a clean continuing resolution that they had voted for previously. It was the exact same funding levels. And Democrats tried to use this bill to keep the government's lights on. They tried to use that as a negotiation tactic to get the Trump administration to renew the Biden era Obamacare health subsidies. Republicans obviously weren't going to do that. What's so odd about all of this is that Republicans went to Democrats and said, hey, we will give you an out here. We'll give you a standalone vote on health care. And because it's standalone, it isn't going to go anywhere. It's a messaging exercise in exchange for your vote to reopen the government. Democrats balked at that deal 3 weeks ago. And then suddenly, after having a really good Tuesday night during the off-year elections, Democrats turned around and took that exact same deal. They completely folded. It was 8 Democrats who, at the last minute, said enough is enough. I think that part of that was reality. They knew that they weren't going to get a policy outcome out of this. They didn't see the pain that this was inflicting on military members, mothers and children who require SNAP benefits, air traffic controllers. They didn't see that as being, worth a messaging bill. They said that the cost was too high, and so those 8 Democrats, basically broke ranks. Trump, though, he can say that there's not going to be another government shutdown, but there's another deadline coming in January, and we will see.
Philip Wegman, thank you for joining the Trump Report.
Thank you, Patty.